Hello, this is Dwight Mutonono, also known as Nyarazi, also known as Mutos, and welcome to the Connection Desk. Now, we're in Acts chapter 15 now. We're past halfway through the book, and we are into one of the most important portions of Scripture, not just in the book of Acts, but in Christian history. Because in Acts chapter 15, there's a decision that was made that had ramifications for Christian history from that time onwards. So we're going to read Acts 15. Today we're going to read Acts 15 verses 1 through to 4. In Acts 15 verse 1 through to 4, some men came down from Judea to Antioch and were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom taught by Moses, you cannot be saved. This brought Paul and Barnabas into sharp dispute and debate with them. So Paul and Barnabas were appointed along with some other believers to go up to Jerusalem to see the apostles and elders about this question. The church sent them on their way, and as they traveled through Phoenicia and Samaria, they told how the Gentiles had been converted. The news made all the brothers very glad. When they came to Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the church and the apostles and elders, to whom they reported everything God had done through them. Now, here we have a situation which was actually a serious threat to the church in Antioch. These men from Judea were ostensibly representing the church in Jerusalem. So these men came in from Jerusalem, and they said, you must be circumcised to be saved. And they might have been there actually when Barnabas was originally sent to Antioch. You see, Barnabas was sent by the Jerusalem church to Antioch right at the beginning, if you remember, in Acts chapter 11. He was sent to Antioch to address this question about the Cypriot and the Cyrenian believers who were going in and going straight to the Greek people or to the Gentile people and preaching the gospel. And there were people now who were being saved, who were uncircumcised. So these men came and they were basically saying, Barnabas, you didn't do your job, because we sent you out here to fix this thing, and you then joined the church and you've become part of this church, and you're now planting other churches. So we told you to come out here and fix this circumcision story. And of course, Barnabas didn't fix it in the way that they might have hoped. Barnabas felt that what they were doing was of God, and he just joined with the church in Antioch, and of course he brought in Paul. So they were challenging the teachings and practices of Antioch Christians because the people were not circumcised. So that was the question they were asking. It represented the entrance into Judaism, circumcision, and of course there was a sharp dispute between Paul and Barnabas and these men who had come from Judea. But the men were dogmatic. You must be circumcised to be saved. They were putting the condition of circumcision ahead of salvation, or as part of salvation. So it was a salvation level issue. It was a primary issue in which you cannot disagree, because either you're saved through circumcision or you're not saved through circumcision. That's where they brought this discussion to. They probably were aware of Peter's encounter with Cornelius and what transpired after that, and they were aware of Antioch church's beginnings. They obviously were aware of that. And what happened? Why is it that they came here? Probably when they saw Peter, maybe they felt like, wow, it's a small issue, it's an outlier. And then when Barnabas went to Antioch, maybe they were thinking, oh, it's going to die down. But then now they probably heard that these guys had gone over to Galatia and to Cyprus, and they had preached the gospel, and they had established churches in those places. So it was becoming a bigger and bigger movement, and they obviously began to pay attention to what was going on here, that this is now something that is really going to be changing the face of the church forever. So they begin to ask the question about circumcision. One of the things about evil forces is they will play around in pockets of unclear doctrine. Wherever there can be a dispute and they can cause all sorts of disharmony, they will love to twist and distort doctrine and bring division. And right from the beginning, Satan is a liar. Right from the beginning, he asked the question, did God really say? That's his tactic. And if we are not biblically astute, if we are not theologically astute, we are going to be in problems in the church. So this is why it's very important to have clear understanding of doctrine. And what they then did was they said, okay, we need to take this thing to Jerusalem. The credibility of Paul and Barnabas was being challenged. They had become influential apostolic level leaders, planting churches in different parts, and they were now reporting back to Antioch as their base. And the question now is, would they follow the teaching taught by Paul and Barnabas, or would they teach what was purportedly from the apostles in Jerusalem? It was now a question of apostolic teaching and apostolic doctrine, theological practice. So the credibility and legitimacy, not just of Paul and Barnabas, but of the whole Antioch church and what they had been doing was in question. Remember, Barnabas joined them. So they started this thing. Then Barnabas joined them. And then Paul joined them. And Paul and Barnabas taught them for at least a year. So the church became stronger and stronger in that space. So the whole church of Antioch was being questioned, and anything that they planted was being questioned. It was a big credibility challenge. And there's also an issue of submission to authority that they were challenging. The men who were coming from Jerusalem, they were saying they represented themselves as the Jerusalem church representatives, or they presented themselves as the Jerusalem church representatives. So when they sent Paul and Barnabas to Jerusalem, it was to hear if indeed the Jerusalem church's stance was represented by these men. And Jerusalem church was, of course, still the headquarters from which the church had emanated. The apostles were based, most of the apostles were based in Jerusalem. And the question now was if the Gentile expression of the church would be different from the Jewish expression. And would the Gentile expression of the church be acceptable? This Gentile expression, which is you come in without circumcision, was really at question. So Paul and Barnabas were received well by the church communities through which they traveled. So they traveled through these areas, Phoenicia, Samaria. There were churches that had been planted there. And the believing church joyfully received them when they got into Jerusalem. And they gave a report of what had happened from that first missionary journey. And basically the report was not just what happened in Antioch, but even the trip that had happened from Antioch to the different places that they had gone to in Cyprus and the region of Galatia. So it was submission to the church, and they reported back to Antioch. Now they reported back to Jerusalem. So when you are sent out and when you are leading a church or you're leading God's people, you should always work in submission and be able to report back to the people through whom you are working. So this is why it's so important to always have plurality of leadership, plurality of eldership. Always have somebody somewhere that you can present yourself to and submit yourself to, fellow brethren, fellow believers, so that your authority is not just based on what you say. It's not about, this is me and this is what I feel God is saying and nobody can question it and I'm a standalone whatever. No, there's nothing like that. In God's church, in God's kingdom, we are working as the people of God, and we are teaching the doctrine of the apostles, the teaching that the apostles passed on to us, and it's been passed on from generation to generation. So the question here was this indeed the teaching of the apostles, and can we accept it as the church practice from here on? And that is why they went to Jerusalem to ask this question. In the next session, we'll be talking about the actual meeting, the Jerusalem Council, and we're looking forward to being with you in the next session. You're blessed.